Welcome to Bleacher Report's NFL Daily. I'm Mitch, and I'm back to focus on the offseason. The Super Bowl is over. The 2024-2025 NFL season is over, and now it's time to look forward to the offseason. My personal favorite part of the offseason is free agency because I feel I have a great handle on all the free agents, the personnel within the NFL, as opposed to the draft, where we're having to learn new players, scout new players, and how they fit for the future of the game. But I like looking at the vets that are available. So in this live stream, I'm going to give you my top 10 free agents, including a couple honorable mentions, and then landing spots for those 10 free agents. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Let me know if I have the right fit. Let me know what you think of my rankings. And let me know if you want these players on your favorite team. Let's get started. And we're going to get started hot with, in my opinion, the most coveted free agent, and that is T. Higgins. T. Higgins has a couple avenues here. First, I do believe that T. Higgins will want to stay in Cincinnati. But my problem is that I don't really think that that's going to be something that's going to be logical. I don't think that the Bengals are going to be able to keep T. Higgins. T. Higgins did just say that obviously he would love to be in Cincinnati. He says he loves it in Cincinnati. He loves the city. He loves the fans. He loves the coaching staff, everything in the building, but it's not in his control whether or not he is in Cincinnati or not. What teams can control is how much money T. Higgins makes. And one team that has a lot of money to spend on a number one wide receiver, and as a fan of this team, you can call me biased, you can call me whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is that the New England Patriots need a wide receiver. They need a number one perimeter threat for the future of their franchise, and that is Drake May. And T. Higgins could solve one of their biggest problems entering the NFL draft, and check it right off the list. T. Higgins is 26 years old. He's coming off, in my opinion, his best season in the NFL, where he was graded as the sixth best wide receiver, according to Pro Football Focus. What I like about T. Higgins, he's got some of the best hands in the NFL. One hand, two hand, fingertip catches, his ability to have strong hands in all situations, especially in contested situations, red zone situations. He is just incredible at finding the football and holding on to that football. He's incredible in those jump ball scenarios. And Drake May showed as a rookie that he loves to throw the ball deep. He loves to give his wide receivers opportunities to win those one-on-ones. And T. Higgins would be a perfect complement to the skill set of Drake May with the big-armed quarterback, okay? Also, T. Higgins, I think, is going to get number one wide receiver money. In my opinion, he was a top 12 wide receiver in the NFL this year. And like I said, I thought he had the best season of his career. He actually had the most receptions per game of his career. He had the most yards per game since the 2021 season where the Bengals went to the Super Bowl. He had the highest success rate of his career. He had the most touchdowns of his career with 10, his first double-digit season. So he's legit. I know that a lot of people kind of wonder about T. Higgins in terms of his ability without Jamar Chase. But even this season, he showed that without Jamar Chase, he can put up number one wide receiver quality numbers. He can beat number one corners. And that's because he has a rare skill set in terms of size, shiftiness at the top of the route to create separation, and then also, a vertical dimension to his game, and that hands, just the special hands that he does offer. The Patriots tried to sign Calvin Ridley. They tried to throw the bag at Calvin Ridley. Unfortunately, he chose the Titans. Now that the Patriots actually have a quarterback to attract a wide receiver talent like Higgins, I believe T. Higgins will choose the Patriots if they give him the contract that I believe they will. Plus, they have Mike Vrabel. They have Josh McDaniels. They have some proven coaches in the building now, not the rookie head coach that was Gerard Mayo. So there's just a lot more certainty in New England than there was last year. They're still going to want to go out and get that big perimeter target. And I think T. Higgins will sign with the Patriots at the end of the day. I thought about Carolina and a reunion. He went to Clemson. So that's possible. I thought about Washington teaming up with Jaden Daniels. I thought about the Chargers and going and hanging out with Herbert. I thought about even the Rams or the Niners as like sneaky teams that might possibly have enough money and a need at wide receiver. Rams without Cooper Kupp. Niners moving on from Debo. Possibilities, but I felt like New England's combination of young, promising quarterback, clear need, and obvious money situation, it just makes the most sense to me. So that's T. Higgins, my number one free agent in 2025. Now, the second best free agent for my money is Trey Smith of the Kansas City Chiefs. Trey Smith is an absolute dog of a right guard, in my opinion, one of the best right guards in football, one of the best guards in football in general. Just for reference, he has never graded lower than the 15th best guard in football, according to Pro Football Focus. 15th, 12th, 10th, and 10th since being drafted by the repeat champs, the 3-time Super Bowl champs, those Kansas City Chiefs, right? He just fell in the Super Bowl, but actually, out of all the offensive linemen, maybe had the best game out of all of them. So that's a promising note. He's excellent in the run game. He's big. He's powerful. He's a bully. And because of that, I think the Chargers actually sneakily surprise people and go out and spend on Trey Smith. Clearly, offensive line was the priority last offseason by drafting Joe Alt. They have Rashawn Slater, but we saw in the playoffs, man, that interior pressure was a real problem in the playoffs for Justin Herbert. Because Justin Herbert is that pocket-centric quarterback, he has that rifle in the pocket. You want to be able to secure that pocket interior protection for Justin Herbert. And you also, within Greg Roman's scheme offensively, want to have a powerful running game with big run blockers and maulers up front. And Trey Smith certainly fits both of those needs, right? The ability to protect Herbert, the ability to run the football with whomever their running back will be moving forward. So it fits the Harbaugh style of football. They have a ton of cap space. I believe they are within the top 5 in terms of cap space, maybe even better than that. He also has been very available in his career. He's only missed 1 game in his entire NFL career. So that's something that I think teams will covet, like the Chargers. So yeah, I think this is a sneaky fit. A lot of people have him going to Chicago. In my last predictions video, I had him going to Chicago because of the connection with Ryan Poles and obviously the need at that position. But let's try something a little bit different. I think the Chargers are going to be looking for offensive linemen, specifically at guard. And I think Trey Smith fits the billing. Our third top free agent in 2025 is the top quarterback in free agency. And because he is the top quarterback by a lot, he ranks number 3 on my list. That is Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold, he obviously finished the season in rough shape, right? He played probably his 2 worst games of the season in his 2 last games of the season. And I think we saw the deficiencies of Sam Darnold. We saw that he likes to hold on to the ball. He has a tendency to maybe hold on a little too long, take too many sacks, maybe pat the ball, see ghosts at times. But there were things about his game that really developed in Minnesota. He's only 27 years old. He hasn't really started a season besides last season, in quite some time. So he hasn't had like a ton of experience lately. But you look at what he was able to do last year, right? 5 game-winning drives, 35 touchdowns, so only 12 picks. He won 14 games in the regular season. He was top 5 in touchdowns. He was up there in yardage. He was 4th in big-time throws. And he was also 4th in terms of average depth of target. So he was not just checking it down. He was launching the ball down the field. And actually, I felt like Sam Darnold, week to week, game to game, had one of the best deep balls in the NFL. And I feel like, obviously, there's a lot of quarterback-needy teams. I'm going with the Giants here. I thought the other alternative was the Raiders, in which I did predict Sam Darnold to go to the Raiders in my last video. But I was also trying to piece together Sam Darnold. Okay, who's the coach going to be with the Raiders? I wasn't really accurate on that. I didn't expect Pete Carroll to get a job. But what I will say about the Giants is Sam was really smart about his location with Minnesota. He was really smart about choosing a good location for him in terms of the quarterback coach, the offensive coach, the scheme, all that sort of stuff. I feel like with Brian Daboll, you can at least be convinced that Brian Daboll does well with quarterbacks. He kind of got the most out of Daniel Jones in 2022. He did extremely well developing Josh Allen. Sam Darnold and Josh Allen were in the same draft class, and they're pretty close. I think they're friends. So there could be a little bit of a relationship there. But then you also just look at the situation. He's got a left tackle in Andrew Thomas. He's got a number one receiver in Malik Neighbors. He has a running back that's promising in Tracy in the backfield. He's got a slot receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. It's not a perfect situation for a quarterback, but it's certainly one of the better ones. I think it's probably better than the Raiders. I'm not exactly sure that the Raiders with Chip Kelly see Sam Darnold as an ideal fit. The Jets, I don't really think would be a great fit just because he already failed there. The fan base already has a preconceived notion of what he is, and the defensive coach in Aaron Glenn. So I don't necessarily view that as the best situation for a quarterback. I would view the Giants a little bit better if I were Sam Darnold, if the money is relatively even. So there's also a chance for redemption here just in New York in general. It doesn't have to be with the same team. But I think there's enough to drive Sam Darnold to the Giants. There will certainly be an opportunity in terms of money and contract. The Giants are picking third, so there's a chance they get a quarterback, but there's also a chance that they don't get one of their top options at quarterback. So there's enough there. And then also he could even serve as a bridge option. So that's also something. So there's a lot to consider here. But Darnold did enough last year to certainly get a starting job. He definitely did enough to be a at least top 15 quarterback at the end of the season. I know that he had some rough moments at the end, but man, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? Cut down a little bit on the turnover-worthy plays, cut down on the sacks, but those are things that you can learn from. Those are things that you can grow, right? You can't really teach his arm strength, his deep ball, his elusiveness, and his ability to run. He's got a lot of tools. I mean, the ability to deliver from multiple angles, even just his success within the system. I thought he did a great job, and Darnold really showed composure as a leader. So there's a lot of promising things there. And he's only 27, guys. Like, he's not, I think he might be 27, 28. So he's not even that old either. So Sam Darnold is my third favorite free agent, and he, I think, will land with the Giants or the Raiders. I'm leaning towards the Giants right now. Now, the fourth best free agent in 2025 is arguably the best linebacker in football, but certainly this past season, he was in the conversation. Zach Bond had another interception in Super Bowl 59, put on a show in the middle of the Eagles defense. I think he probably remains with the Eagles if I'm being realistic here. I'm going to give a couple other alternatives because I don't want to be boring. But let's be fair. Zach Bond was a gem of a find by Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman is going to have a connection with Bond just for that fact. And Bond will probably have the respect to return to Philadelphia just because, hey, look at how well he played in that system. He's only ever had one phenomenal year in the NFL, and it was within Vic Fangio's defense. And yeah, it's just hard to kind of, if you're Bond, like why, even if it were for a little bit less money to return to the Eagles, why would you not want to return to the Eagles, right? You're running arguably the best defense in football entering next year. You had such a great year, an all-pro season. You had 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, led the NFL in tackles with 151. You had 11 tackles for loss. You had 8 games with 10-plus tackles. You were first in coverage grade, according to PFF. Like, all that he did in the playoffs, too. I think he had multiple interceptions. You know, just that is going to be so important for Fangio, too, like to keep that guy. If Philadelphia wants to repeat as champs, if they want to potentially build on what they did this year, Bond is going to be essential. So they can't let him walk either. So I think both sides will see the value in each other, and I think they'll come together and realize that. Now, that being said, I do think that there's 2 locations to look out for. Arizona has a ton of cap space. Jonathan Gannon, obviously the former Eagle defensive coordinator, does have a need at linebacker. I believe Kaiser White is also a free agent who is kind of like their top linebacker the last couple of years. And Gannon does run a similar system to Vic Fangio. Bond would also be very interesting in terms of all the different simulated looks and the blitzes and the ways that Gannon and that defense has been operating in terms of their usage of their athletes and their linebackers. He can rush from the edge. He can rush from, the middle of the pocket. There's different things he can do. He's great in coverage. That would be a great signing. Arizona has a ton of cap compared to the Eagles, so that's certainly one to look for. Denver is another team that I think maybe their biggest need is linebacker. And Vance Joseph, I would not say it's a very similar scheme, but in terms of Sean Payton did draft Bond in New Orleans, right? He was originally in New Orleans, and then Sean Payton kind of left abruptly. So we don't really know what he had in terms of his plans in store for Bond and how he was going to develop as a New Orleans Saint. So there could be a connection there, or there could be a little bit of Sean Payton trying to get the guy that he drafted onto his team to help fill the biggest hole. And the Broncos have enough cap space to definitely upgrade that middle part of their defense. So those are some teams to look out for as competition for the Eagles. Now, my fifth free agent in 2025 is Ronnie Stanley. And this one is going to be good because we've already talked about the Patriots. But guys, look, the Patriots have $120 million in cap space. They're going to spend some money. And Ronnie Stanley, the biggest need on their roster is the tackle position. I could see the Patriots going crazy in this free agency and fulfilling the needs across their roster, especially their offense. I mean, there is just no chance that Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels roll back into 2025 with Lowe and DeMontre Jacobs as their left tackle and right tackle combination. It's just not going to happen. The Patriots had, in my opinion, the worst offensive line in football this year, a historically bad offensive line by the metrics. They were awful. They need to protect Drake May, and Stanley is your best bet. He is getting a little bit older. He's turning 31 in March, but this guy has been formerly one of the best left tackles in football, as good as arguably the best pure pass blocker in the NFL, as, you know, recently as a couple years ago, honestly. This past year, he played the second most snaps at the tackle position in the NFL, showcasing his health and his ability to maybe long-term stay healthy, because the biggest problem throughout his career has been the ability to stay on the football field. He's turning 31 in March, but he still played at a high level, 37th PFF grade. He actually had a really good pass blocking grade of above 80, around 81. And he's been pretty steady. He was 16th in pass block grade. He's been pretty steady at the tackle position. He's not quite looked at the former All-Pro that he used to be, but I would say that he's definitely an above average tackle. So he'll garner a big contract, a lot of money, a team that is willing to overpay him to a certain degree. So I could see the Patriots giving him like a 3-year contract and maybe overpaying him a little bit just to secure their weakest position on their roster, that is left tackle. So yeah, I'm giving the Patriots 2 of the top free agents, but honestly, they have so much money that like they could definitely pull it off. Another thing in terms of the fit, I do believe that Ronnie Stanley would be a good fit for a system like McDaniels, being that he's from Baltimore. Both teams tend to run a lot of power run game stuff. McDaniels has always been oriented towards the power running game. So I could see Stanley fitting in the system seamlessly in that regard as well. So I like the fit in New England. I think it's a clear need, and they obviously have the money to fulfill it. The sixth top free agent, in my opinion, is arguably my favorite player in free agency, one of my favorite players in the NFL. That is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was actually leading the NFL in receptions until he got injured. He was that good in the year 2024. But he had a major injury, and he's closing in on 30. So it's going to be difficult to understand, where did the Bucs value him? How did the Bucs view the rest of their needs on their roster, with McMillan really having a breakout late season in 2024, 2025? He could be the future complement of Mike Evans. How much longer does Godwin really have at playing at a high level? So there's all those questions that you have to answer. And I could see a team like Pittsburgh being pretty desperate for a wide receiver and maybe just being willing to pay him a lot more than Tampa Bay. Because the Steelers desperately need a wide receiver. We saw that last year. They could use a tough middle of the field target. Chris Godwin has always given me Hines Ward type vibes, like the ability to get chippy, block, catch the ball over the middle, create yards after catch, not being the fastest guy, but just having this incredible toughness and this ability to just continue to fight through contact, take big hits, have great hands over the middle of the field. That is certainly a player that fits the Steeler billing. He did attend Penn State way back, and that could be a place that he would want to go. It's totally opposite of Tampa Bay. Wouldn't have to really deal with, some people think he could go to Carolina, but that would be a direct rivalry with Tampa Bay. That might be a little bit awkward because he is kind of like a Bucs legend. He won a Super Bowl there. He's been so successful there. I don't really see him going there. I could see Jacksonville maybe if they move on from Christian Kirk because of the connection to Liam Cohen. But I do think that Mike Tomlin can really get any free agent to sign with him. The Steelers have always had success with wide receivers. There is the lingering question of George Pickens always. And yes, the Steelers do need to solve their quarterback situation, but this is a very talented defense. This is a team that will be looking to spend on veterans at their biggest needs because this is a win now roster outside of the quarterback position. So Chris Godwin does make a lot of sense at their biggest need on their football team outside of the quarterback spot. At number 7, if you would rather have Darius Slayton signed than Chris Godwin, I think you're crazy, bro. Chris Godwin is a lot better than Darius Slayton. I like Darius Slayton, but I mean, come on, man. That's not even a conversation. Like, are you kidding? Are you kidding, man? At number 6, we've got Jevon Holland, former Miami Dolphin. I don't think he'll remain a Miami Dolphin. This is actually I got a different team there than the logo. But we'll explore both. Now, in terms of Jevon Holland, he was drafted by Brian Flores in Miami. Some people think that could lead him to go to Minnesota. This one is actually very ambiguous in terms of where he could land. Actually, I could see him landing with a lot of different teams. In my last prediction video, I had him going to Jacksonville. The Rams are certainly a possibility, although I feel like they have multiple younger safeties that I don't think they mind very much, but they do need to spend some money on their defense, and they do need to get faster on defense. But the location that I actually like the most for Jevon Holland is the Raiders. And let me go through this. So Flores was, of course, in Miami. Flores connected to Patrick Graham. Both guys came from the Patriots. Patrick Graham is Raiders defensive coordinator. Okay. Also, back when Flores and Graham were with the Patriots, they had a guy named Devin McCourty. Holland, to me, reminds me a lot of that player in terms of the versatility to play man or zone coverage, the ability to tackle, blitz, be that solo free safety and play with speed and range. I also look at Pete Carroll and his ability to look at safeties and get the most out of them, like Earl Thomas, for example, who does fit the same mold. Holland does fit that same similar type of free safety mold. He also had Cam Chancellor in Seattle, Pete Carroll being the new coach there, but still running Patrick Graham's system, right? Holland, I think, will get more money than people think. He was twice a top 4 safety in PFF's grading, looked at as an elite player. He just has incredible talent, just in terms of physically. He's got the speed to cover all over the field. He's got the range to do everything. And I think a new location would serve him well. There's going to be a lot of suitors, and I think a lot of them we're not really going to know until he signs. But I definitely view a team like the Raiders as one of my favorites for him. In terms of the Rams, I think that just in general, they had one of the slowest secondaries in the NFL. They really couldn't cover in man-to-man. They really were overly reliant on their pass rush. So adding somebody to the secondary would certainly help. So I think Holland could really land anywhere. You guys let me know in the comments where you think he'll land, but certainly one of the best players on the defensive side, in my opinion, in this free agency. Really excited to see where he goes. Next up, at number 8, we've got Josh Sweat from Super Bowl 59's performance. That's going to get him a lot more money. Josh Sweat, I think, will be somebody that will be interesting because obviously these guys that are Super Bowl champions are always getting more money than you would expect, just because everybody watched how they played in the Super Bowl. Everybody watched the playoff run. Everybody knows who these guys are. Usually these guys get somewhat overpaid to a certain degree, but I do think that Josh Sweat is a really good player and has been for some time, beyond just Super Bowl 59. Where he did have 3 sacks and 7 pressures or whatever in that game, 6 tackles. Just an incredible game. He led the team, the Philadelphia Eagles, in pressures this regular season with 54, which was tied for 21st in the NFL. He does turn only 28 in March. It feels like he's a little bit older. He did have his career high 11 sacks in 2022 when the Eagles set a record for sacks in a season. But he's steadily been around 7, 6.5 to 8 sacks. He's not a guy that's usually going to get 10 plus sacks, but he's more of a pressure than sack guy. He's usually very productive and consistent in creating and generating pressure. I think he has a good all-around game, solid against the run. He's got enough size, and that's why I view him as a good Detroit Lion. Like, I think he's got the ideal skill set to complement Aiden Hutchinson. He's not an overwhelming pass rusher, but he can certainly take advantage of matchups, as we saw in that Super Bowl. You can give him a matchup one-on-one and he'll feast. He can win with finesse and dip and bend, and he can win with length and power as well. You know, he's got a really good just complement of moves and complement of skill set. Aiden Hutchinson's one of the best pass rushers in football, who's constantly, being asked basically to beat double teams. So Detroit could desperately utilize another rusher on the opposite side that can also just feast on the other side. So that's where you could see Sweat get 9, 10, 11 sacks on the Lions with guys across the line like McNeil and DJ Reader and Aiden Hutchinson. I think the biggest needs on the Lions, you look across their roster, right? Offensive line, they're pretty darn good. Like right guard with, I think Zeitler is a free agent, so that might be something they have to solve. But wide receiver, they've got pretty much everybody returning. Running backs are returning. Tight end is returning. Quarterbacks returning. Other than the coaching staff, right? Look at the defense. They could use a corner because Carlton Davis is a free agent. But besides that, I really think their biggest need is a pass rusher. And they have enough cap space to spend on one. They're 10th most in cap space. So great compliment for Hutchinson, something that they've never really tried to address over the last couple of years. I think they address it this off season with Josh Sweat. The number 9 free agent entering the 2025 free agency period is the future Hall of Fame Khalil Mack. My landing spot for Khalil Mack, who I've previously talked about multiple destinations for him and the best fits for Khalil Mack, is the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers love their defensive linemen. This is almost too obvious. The 49ers tried to actually trade for Khalil Mack when he was with the Raiders, and the only reason he did not become a Niner is because the Raiders did not want to trade Khalil Mack to the Niners because of their beef and their rivalry. That's the only reason. They actually offered the best offer, the most money, everything. It was just that, we're not going to give you Khalil Mack and have him join Nick Bosa. But he's gotten a little bit older. He's been with the Chargers. He's been with the Raiders. He's played in California quite a bit. So why not stick around in San Francisco? I think what the Niners will be searching for is an edge complement to Nick Bosa. This pass rush this season was overly reliant on Nick's ability to get to the quarterback. They, of course, lost Javon Hargrave to injury. Don't think Hargrave will be back with the team. So that does hurt the pass rush. They have guys like Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos and Malik Collins, guys that are solid across the board, but not really, difference makers, so to speak. And the Niners always seem to covet difference makers on their defensive line because Robert Saleh's defense, now that he's back in San Francisco, is heavily reliant on a 4-man rush, right? You think about the guys that he had with the Jets and who he tried to get with the Jets. Hassan Reddick was an example. They tried to acquire him, didn't work out, but he had Quinnen Williams. They drafted multiple first-round talents in the first round to bring a pass rush to the New York Jets. And that's when his defense operates at its best. Remember when he was in San Francisco, they had D Ford and Nick Bosa, right? So they had DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. That was an incredible defensive line. They're going to try to build something similar. And Mack is still playing at a really high level, and he's an all-around, well-rounded defensive lineman that can play on all 3 downs. You don't have to worry about it. He was second on the Chargers with 6 sacks. He had 2 forced fumbles and 9 passes defense this year. He had 17 sacks last season. But the thing is, he was actually graded higher this year than he was last year. 5th graded edge in 2024 compared to 6th last season, despite the sack difference. And he was also 2nd best in run defense overall and 17th best in pass rush. So his ability to not be the focus of an offensive line, because Nick Bosa will always be that focus, to more be the number 2, the complement, which was the idea with Joey Bosa, that would make a lot of sense in San Francisco. And they have a lot of money too. So I think the 49ers will be able to make this work on a short-term deal with the future Hall of Famer Khalil Mack. Our 10th free agent this offseason. This might be a little bit of a wild card because I don't think a lot of people will have him in their top 10, but I just feel like what he did this year, his youth still in his career, his former draft stock, and then also the potential that exists in this player. Mekhi Becton is a player that I think will be somebody that gets a surprising offer in free agency. He's 6'7", 363 pounds. He's an absolute mauler of a guard, and he was sensational for the Eagles. Huge reason Saquon had that 2,000-yard season because of his just unique ability to just absolutely get out in space and destroy people at the second level. And I love his fit with Chicago. So if Chicago does not end up with Trey Smith, I think Mekhi Becton could be a good pivot. He's only 26 years old. He might be turning 27, but I'm not exactly sure about that. He's the former 11th overall pick in the 2020 draft. A lot of teams thought he was going to be an absolute stud, and due to injuries, he fell off a bit. It took him quite some time to get into shape, to get back into conditioning. And sure, there could be some concern about him in terms of his weight. And if you give him a big money contract, how will his motivation continue? But if you get this guy at his best, this could become one of the best run blocking, pure dominant guards in football, as he was this year, right? And still a lot of room to grow. And you think about Ben Johnson's offense and what he's going to want. He's going to want to run the ball. He's going to want to be physical. He's going to want to have a great running game to complement Caleb Williams like he had in Detroit, right? He had an offensive line that could dictate the game, that could maul people, right? So I think Mekhi Becton would be a great add here. 5th most cap space for the Chicago Bears. They clearly need an interior offensive lineman, as Matt Pryor, their right guard, is a free agent. All 3 of their interior linemen are actually all free agents, so Becton could fulfill one of those positions. They need to protect Caleb Williams, a big man that's a former tackle. You would think would be an ideal player to protect Caleb Williams. He was sacked 68 times. Yes, he needs to deal with his ability to process and get the ball out. That will be on Ben Johnson, but a way to help him is by getting big guys that can block. And Mekhi Becton is certainly that. So given the strength of the position, given you think about his youth, you think about his potential, I think that he is somebody that's a sneaky, underrated asset in free agency to look out for. So those are the top 10 free agents and my top landing spot for each of those names. Now, I have 2 honorable mentions that I want to throw out to you guys. 2 names that didn't quite make my list, but were in the conversation, I think are very appealing names in free agency. First is Stephon Diggs. Now, I did not put Stephon Diggs in my top 10 because Diggs is coming off a very serious injury, an ACL injury. But this past season, he was still really good. I mean, he played 8 games with the Texans. He had 7 games with 5+ catches, which is a really good number. And what I liked about Stephon Diggs was Diggs shifted to the slot this year, right? Like with the Bills and Minnesota, he was primarily known for his ability to play on the perimeter, his ability to just run routes and even get vertical and be just an intermediate demon route running wise and separation wise. But he became like the short yak option for the Texans. So I could see that really fitting with a team like the Commanders. I believe Stephon Diggs is from Maryland, actually. So this would make a lot of sense. He also would be going to a team that clearly needs a number 2 wide receiver. They probably would be willing to wait for Diggs to fully recover. He would be a great complement to McLaurin, but also be similar enough to McLaurin that you could almost use them interchangeably. McLaurin is better and healthier, but Diggs has the same sort of dimensions. They're almost the same size. They have similar quickness. I think McLaurin probably has more vertical speed at this point, but you could kind of use them all around the formation. Diggs has always been sneaky in terms of his yak ability, which was such a big part of Washington's offense with Cliff Kingsbury's approach. A lot of screens, a lot of underneath routes. So I could see Diggs really working out there. And then we've seen Washington be attracted to these veteran players that have a pedigree for success, right? You're talking about Zach Ertz. You're talking about Austin Eckler. You're talking about Jamison Crowder, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. The list goes on. All these guys were vets that they signed onto their team, that they wanted to be a part of their culture. Now, there's always the existing thought of Stephon Diggs being a bit of a cancer. He seemed to get along with the Texans, and I think that he would be able to vibe with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels seems to have that aura to him that he's going to attract a lot of these veteran players that want to have success at the end of their careers. Daniels would certainly be a great fit with Diggs. So getting Daniels another guy, like a compliment that he can go to in one-on-one situations, would totally open up this offense to the next level. And I think that's what Washington needs to look out for. So if they can't get a T. Higgins, maybe they're just priced out by the Patriots, or maybe that's not exactly the ideal player that they're looking for within Cliff's offense, given how much short route and short area stuff they do and how much of their offense is based on screens and things. I think Diggs would actually be somewhat of a better fit, and his inside-outside versatility compared to T. Higgins might be more appealing for a cheaper price. So Stephon Diggs to Washington, I think, is a really sneaky option for the Commanders. My last player in this video and final honorable mention will be at the cornerback position. We really didn't mention the corner position throughout this video, so we're going to end it off with DJ Reed, who I think has been one of the more underrated players in the NFL the past few seasons. When you think about his grading, he's been 14th, 8th, 23rd, and 16th since the year 2020. Pretty much a top 20 corner in the NFL, maybe even top 15 over the past 4 or 5 seasons. DJ Reed this year actually was 11th in forced incompletion percentage, forcing 11 incompletions in his coverage and allowing less than a 60% completion percentage, ranking 26th with a 58.3% completion. Now, DJ Reed, I think will land with the Packers. I think the Packers will be looking for a corner, and I like the scheme fit here because it's not too dissimilar from what he performed in New York, right? You're thinking about the Packers defense that is a variation of the Robert Saleh San Francisco defense. That is where their defensive coordinator comes from initially. Then he brought his talents to Boston College and then to Green Bay. With Alexander potentially being cut or maybe moving on, corner could become even a bigger need. But if Alexander does stay, Reed would be the perfect number 2, as he was to Sauce Gardner at the peak of their defense a couple years ago, or last season, I guess you could say. But Reed's getting a little bit older. I don't think he'll be overly expensive. That's not usually the Packers' way to go, is by going super expensive. But he is a value free agent that's a little bit of an older, not older. He's not necessarily old. I think he's like 29, 28. He's not that old, but he's a player that's undervalued, underrated, could slip under the cracks, is a little bit undersized. So typically those players don't get huge money and huge contracts, but that's exactly the type of player that the Packers do need to add. They just need to get a little bit better on the perimeter of both sides of the football, and especially corner. Corner's been a problem for them, in my opinion, for the last 2 years, especially the depth of that position. So I think Reed could help solve that with his playmaking skills on the perimeter. So those are my top 10 free agents this NFL free agency. Those are my landing spots. Those are my honorable mentions. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like the video, guys. Don't forget to follow me on the BR app. We're here at least twice a week throughout the offseason and hopefully next regular season, but throughout the offseason with all your free agency coverage, all your free agency news, breakdowns, draft coverage, all that sort of stuff. Guys, check out NFL Daily tomorrow at 7 Eastern. I'll be back on Friday. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.